Välkommen allesammen, happy Halloween, or should we say Goder Nyår, which is the Old Norse version for Happy New Year. So this is the new year in the Norse calendar. This video today is being released probably on the same day as the Norse New Year. It's going to be the 9th of October, and not just the Norse, all the Germanic peoples during pagan times before we adapted our modern Gregorian calendars. Right now would have been our New Year. In the Norse world it was called Vetrnætr or Winter Nights, but it would have been called slight variations depending on where it was. So that's better. So I've done some longer videos about this that you can check out. This is just a quick one explaining this holiday, why it's on this particular date, what's the correlation between this and Halloween, and what might we be able to do to practice this day as historically accurate as possible. So let's consult the calendar here. We are on the full moon of October 9th, and this is a lot earlier than usual because it would have traditionally been right near Halloween. However, the Germanic peoples and every other people in Europe originally operated on a lunar calendar primarily. The solar cycles were taken into it, of course, but the moon cycles are of course shorter than the solar one, so the new year falls a couple weeks shorter each year actually, until it gets too far back, and then they would have the need to add a leap month to the following year to catch it up. We are in one of these years right now, and that's why the new year is so early this year. But if you go back 2 years, the full moon was actually exactly on our modern day Halloween. But this year, it's about as early as it can get, so remember that. Also, when we look at Jul, which is supposed to be the midwinter, which is, 3 full moons after Vetrnætr, it's also supposed to be on the first full moon after the new moon after the solstice. So this year it just lines up perfectly. We are pretty sure that these are the right dates. And this is all according to Andreas Nordberg, basically the top expert on the Norse holidays and calendar. Now, some others will put the months a bit different than what I have here on this calendar. Some people will put the new year starting on the new moon instead of the full moon. Some people do that, and that's totally fine. For our calendar, though, what I chose to do here was make it start on the full moon because according to Tacitus, the Germanic peoples celebrated their holiest days on the full moons. Also, in an Anglo-Saxon source, speaking about the English before they became Christian, when they were still pagan, they started their winter season on the full moon, and that one was called Vinterfyllet. So if you're English, that's what you might want to call this day right around this time, as opposed to it being called Vetrnætr in the Norse world. So the Norse had 2 seasons, like the other Germanic peoples, summer and winter only. 2 seasons, 2 parts of the year. So we are at the start of the winter right now, and it is one of the 3 major holidays and sacrifices in our tradition. This supposedly goes back to the time where Odin lived, and he migrated with the Aesir to Scandinavia, which is estimated to be right around the year 0. But of course, this tradition is much older than that, as you can see in this quote. Now, these 3 holy sacrifices that are spoken about here, the blóts, we have a lot of attestations in the Norse sagas, and there are a good amount about Jul, but there's basically nothing about Sigrblót at the start of the summer. But the Vetrnætr, the one we're at right now, is mentioned by far the most out of all of them in the sources, okay? So, details about exactly what went on at these celebrations are not given, guys, okay? All the sources were written by Christians, and this was the highest pagan holiday, so they were never going to record all the pagan sacrifices and traditions, or how to sing the förkyrklig, the songs to summon the spirits, or anything like that. Those things are just not going to be recorded. So those things are lost. But there is some info given in the sources that we can use as a guide to celebrate it as historically accurate as we possibly can. First, look here. It states that there should be a sacrifice to bring a good year at this time. And that could mean good luck, or good health, or success, or good hamninga, whatever you interpret that to be for a good year to come. Now there are a couple other sources that mention a homestead is supposed to take place on Vetrnætr, so a sacrifice meaning to have a good harvest was done. This is mentioned in Gisli Saga, that it was actually done on the Vetrnætr right here. So guys, usually a homestead would be too late for the Vetrnætr, okay? If the Vetrnætr was like usual and it's at the end of October time, like it should be, the harvest in Scandinavia has already happened long before this, and it's just too cold by then. They're not doing any harvesting in November, okay? Not now, not in the Viking Age either. That's why for next year, what I did is I put the homestead in 1 month before Vetrnætr at homestead. So like late September, mid-September time. However, in this year, Vetrnætr is on October 9th, so quite early, and this might be an occasion that the Norse would have done a sacrifice now for a good harvest that they were going to harvest in the next coming week. So go ahead, if you have a farm or some harvest or some plants going on this month that you plan on harvesting, it would be a good idea for you to make a sacrifice to the good harvest. Next thing is that it is very clear in these sources that it was 3 nights. Vetrnætr is plural, it means winter nights, plural, and also in a couple sources, Jomsvikinga Saga, Haakon the Goods Saga, and Vala-Ljots Saga, it all mentions that Vetrnætr and also Jul was supposed to be a 3-night celebration, with most likely the sacrifice happening on the 3rd night, and that 3rd night the sacrifices would always be held at the full moon. So today is Thursday today. I am going to be making a sacrifice on Saturday, but I am definitely getting a little crunk tonight, just a little bit of alcohol, but the main party and celebration is going to be Saturday. So guys, also pay attention to the full moon and what time the full moon is supposed to be at. There's a reason that all these rituals and traditions and magic in the folk tradition, it should be done on the waxing moon, okay? Even better, the fuller it gets. It gives it more power, all of these traditions and rituals and whatever. And there's even some evidence for the Viking Age that certain things should not be done during the waning moon. Here is something called the Eggja-stone, dealing how to carve runes, by the way, if you plan on doing that. So the full moon, for me here on the west coast where I'm living right now, it actually comes at about noontime on Sunday, on October 9th. I'm not going to be up in the morning doing any practices or sacrifices like that, so it's better for me to do it on Saturday night as opposed to Sunday night, because by that time, Sunday night, the moon will be waning. But for you guys, it may be different. On the East Coast or in Europe, the full moon will peak later on in the day, and you may want to go out Sunday afternoon and do yours. Whatever you want, basically the closer you can get to the full moon without it being after the full moon when it has started to wane, the better it's going to be. So what about the celebrations and the sacrifices? How was it exactly practiced? I'm sure you're all wondering. As I mentioned, these types of things are not something that the Christian authors would have wrote down in detail in the Middle Ages, but what we do know is a couple things. First, there was a sumbel or feast. There are many sources explaining that. We also have records of a homestead, a dísablót, and álfablót, all taking place at this time of year on the Vetrnætr, depending on the saga. So the homestead is for a good harvest, as I went over. The dísablót is a sacrifice to the female spirits, and the álfablót is sacrificing the elves or the masculine ancestral spirits. So guys, this is no different than any other culture in the world. At this time of year, around October, it is believed by all humans, if we go back far enough, everyone believed that this was a time that was good to be closer to your dead ancestors, and it's a time where the borders between our world and the next are the thinnest. So it's a great time to honor your ancestors, make any connections, do any utiseta or årsgang or whatever you want to do. Now, how do we do these types of things exactly, especially considering if you're going to do a blót or sacrifice? Well, in Kormaks Saga, we have pretty much the best description in detail of any sacrifice to the elves or ancestral spirits. So basically, you go to a hill or a large boulder on your property or anywhere that the ancestral spirits might be residing. You sacrifice a bull, redden the boulder with blood, as is done in many other sources. You leave some meat there to let the elves feed on it, and that would apparently heal you, give you good health, and we have multiple sources saying that the elves could do things like heal injuries, sickness, or just bring good luck pretty much. So that's what a sacrifice to the elves would be for. Now I assume most of you don't have a spare bull to sacrifice, okay? And most of you probably don't live in your ancestral lands either, where the elves might reside. But you can do some things. Like if I'm back home in Norway, I would usually go out to a burial mound or ancient sacred site and just leave some raw beef and blood if possible. Here in Los Angeles, I don't have any of my ancestral sacred spaces nearby, but what I do is I look for something called álfablót, that are big boulders with kind of like a bowl shaped indent in it. Some evidence that these were used in pagan times to drain the blood into, and that's where they would collect it, and then the spirits would come to drink it and basically be woken up and filled with some life. This is an ancient Greek thing too, by the way, that you can read about in the famous Odyssey. But also, as recent as a couple hundred years ago in the Scandinavian folk tradition, you could smear some butter in here, one of these álfablót, and spirits like that too. And another thing that you guys can do is just, feel free to leave out some offerings at burial mounds, if you have any ancestors, if you have any family graves in a cemetery nearby, those types of things. You can honor them, tell stories, hang up pictures, and even dress up like them as we do on Halloween. All of this is just to honor the ancestors and basically make the most out of the time of year where the borders between our world and the next are thinnest, and keeping their memories alive and honoring them. This is not just a modern thing, but it was done very long ago. And like I said, dressing up like them is a big, big way to do this. Maybe this is where Halloween comes from. This is probably not just a modern thing, but it was done very, very long ago. As far back as we have records of this, and, even further, in my opinion. So if you're looking for some ideas about more ways to honor the ancestors, you can check out this video I did here on all the sources about ancestral worship in the Norse tradition. There is also some very interesting evidence and theories about a hunt or ritual to become a berserker or ulfheidin. Just like this wolf skin on me right now, we think that this time of year was a time for the young men who are being initiated into adulthood would go out on this hunt. But this is kind of a lot of, theoretical stuff comparing traditions from all over Indo-European cultures, but we think it could be a very, very old thing, and it was basically initiated at this time of year. So go see my video on that if you're interested, but other than that, have fun, guys. Let us know. Are you doing anything special? A lot of you have already ordered the calendar here, but for those of you that don't, have no fear. The calendar, the Norse year has just started, so there is still the full year of holidays and guides that you will see coming, and I will be doing videos on more of these as we go on. But that's all I have to say for today. Just a quick little guide about how you can celebrate Vetrnætr in the most historically accurate we possibly can do in our modern society today. But that's all. Vi ses nästa gång.